Hey, good morning, friend. Or good morning. It's morning when I'm recording this. Good morning, good day, hello, general hello. Welcome to the YouTube channel for the Renaissance English History Podcast. I'm your host, Heather. I've been podcasting on Tudor England since 2009, the original Tudor History Podcast. This channel is where I put all of my episodes from all of my different shows, as well as lots of fun content. This video right here. This month is Women's History Month, of course, and we're going to start it off today with a look at a day in the life of various types of Tudor women. So I've done episodes that are like a day in the life of, we did like a day in the life in London, a day in the life in 16th century Cambridge, a day in the life of different types of people. And the one comment that always comes back to me, which is totally valid, is that it's all stuff that men are doing. And that is true. And there's a reason for that, because of course, men were doing things that went in the record. So women were not, nobody was writing until later on towards the end of the 16th century, beginning of the 17th century, when there were like household books and books about how to keep your household, things like that. People weren't really writing very much in the record about what women were doing, right? Women weren't at guild meetings that were being recorded. Women weren't at Parliament, which was, where a lot of records come from. Women weren't starting businesses, doing things like that would have been recorded, right? So it's kind of one of those real missings from history that we don't have these very clear records of what women were doing that during that time. We do start to get, and later on in Women's History Month, we're going to talk about letters. We do get a picture from letters that women were writing, and especially as literacy improved. That is one of the beautiful things about Protestant Reformation was, and I say this as an Episcopalian, but it doesn't matter. The effect that it had was to create more literacy, a literacy boom. That combined with the printing press, it's one of those really beautiful little serendipitous things that happen in history. We've got the printing press and the Protestant Reformation with its emphasis on having a direct relationship with God and having the Bible in the vernacular, having people being able to read the Bible directly, right? That leads to this huge boom in literacy that we didn't have before. So again, by the end of the 16th century, we start to get more letters, we start to get diaries, things like that we don't have in the beginning. So we're going to talk about all that and more this month on Women's History Month. So today we are going to talk a little bit about a day in the life of typical Tudor women, looking at a more lower class, peasanty sort of woman and noble women and how their days diverged. I'm also going to go on a 30-second rant from something that was in one of the comments. So one of the things about the Tudor period was, of course, there were these vastly different strata of society. But one thing that's pretty cool that we do see during this period that I think makes it very interesting is the rise of this merchant middle class that we hadn't seen before. In the medieval period, it was serfs and nobles. There were some, but not a lot in the middle class. And that's one thing we really start to see in the Tudor period is this rise of this middling class. But the social hierarchies, of course, deeply influenced the lived experiences of the women themselves, from the regal chambers of the noble women to the humble hearths of the peasants. So let's talk about morning routines. If you have watched anything like The Crown or Downton Abbey or anything like that, you know that the noble would wake up with the maid opening the curtains and saying, "Oh, good morning." And the maids would have been there ready to assist with any kind of elaborate morning rituals that the noble women had. And for both noble women and peasant women, no matter whether you're later with Elizabeth in the Protestant period or earlier with Henry VII, when everything was still Catholic, prayers would have been the first order of business. So no matter what class you were, you wake up and you start with your prayers because, of course, these rituals through the day kept people rooted. And of course, there was this intertwining with daily life, with ritual observance of religion and the different religious practices. So that would have been the first order of business. For noble women, the process of dressing was an art in itself. You would have had these layers of garments with intricate laces. They would have had to have been kind of tied into them. It was a process, right? Contrastingly, a peasant woman would have greeted the day with the crow of the rooster their morning devoid of any leisure as they plunged right into the day's demands after their morning prayers. Their homes, often simple one-room cottages, buzzed with activities as they stoked the hearth, prepared the meals, and tended to the animals, all before the sun fully made it into the sky. The absence of maids or servants in their world meant that their hands were responsible for every task, from mending garments to kneading bread, their routines shaped by necessity and resilience. Going into household management, for noble women, the household was a place where they governed, they ruled. It demanded astute management skills, kind of like running a small village. These women would have been like the conductors of a symphony orchestra, with all of these different servants, each with their own very specific roles. Their days were punctuated with things like meal planning for feasts and even intimate gatherings. There would have been a lot of entertaining as part of their lives. So they would have spent a lot of time planning the meal, planning the shopping, planning things like that. Social gatherings, of course, weren't just leisure activities, but they were strategic platforms for alliances and displays of status and wealth, each event carefully orchestrated to reflect the family's prestige. Peasant women in their own domain faced a different sort of challenges. Their homes, lacking in grandeur, were still the centers of relentless activity. The management of their household meant that they had to make do with limited resources to provide for their families. They were cooking, cleaning, child rearing, and that was interspersed with the rhythms of agricultural life, their responsibilities extending beyond the threshold of their house into the fields and the markets where they contributed to the family's sustenance. Work responsibilities. Noble women's roles extended into the realms of estate management, especially, women would be home a lot noble women would be home while their husbands were at court. So they had to know how to manage the estate. They also ran charitable endeavors. Their influence would quietly shape the political and the religious landscape of their area, of their time. Their job, while their husband was away in London at Parliament or at court, was to really keep their status in their home area, to keep everything running, to make sure their reputation was as good as always, to make sure no power was lost, everything like that. So they really had a lot of responsibility, especially when the husband was away. And, that it makes me think, we see these themes, especially thinking about Women's History Month, when men went away to fight in wars. I'm thinking World War I and World War II, like Rosie the Riveter, the we can do it girl, woman, that women would take on these roles that were traditionally men's roles while the men were away. And then the men would come back. And there must have been this feeling of like, I can manage your estate as good as you can. I look at how more 20th century women had dealt with that and how that led to the women's movement and everything, different waves of feminism. And I just wonder kind of what it was like for them, for those noble women, if they'd spent 6 months or a year managing the estate, keeping everything running while the husband was at Parliament, at court. And then the Lord comes back and he's like, all right, I'm here, I'm back, I'm in charge. And that must have been a weird dynamic for them, don't you think? Must have been a little weird. Some of these women then would be patrons of arts, of education, using their resources to support monasteries, hospitals, scholars, weaving their legacy into the fabric of society. Peasant women, on the other hand, their hands are etched by their hard labor. They engaged in the essential work of agriculture, or whatever trade their husband was in. Of course, they would be helping their husband if their husband was a baker or, anything like that. They would be right in there helping. Their work was directly tied to the land's yield, to the yield of their family. Markets were arenas where they showcased their produce and their goods, from fabrics to ales. Their entrepreneurial spirit, a vital undercurrent to the economy. Despite the constraints of their class, their contributions were no less significant, sustaining and enriching the community with their labor and crafts. Well, moving on to the afternoon activities. For noble women, their afternoons were often reserved for leisure, for the pursuit of personal interests in their tapestry-lined grand chambers in their grand homes. They would to embroidery, which was a very valued skill that would allow them to express their creativity while also producing beautiful works that they could give as gifts or use in the household. They would play music on the lute or the virginals. Some even composed their own pieces. Many of them would then also read, with literature ranging from chivalric romances to religious texts. These afternoons were also the perfect opportunity to host or attend a social gathering where they could engage in conversation with their fellow noblewomen, exchange news, and solidify alliances within their social circles. Contrastingly, for a peasant woman, her afternoon was pretty much just like the morning, with work in the fields and at home and in her husband's trade. The division between work and leisure was very blurred, as their responsibilities to their families and communities persisted. They might spend their time tending to the vegetable gardens, feeding the livestock, finishing up the day's agricultural work. In some cases, they would engage in communal work, such as helping with a neighbor's harvest or participating in the village maintenance. Despite the hard work, there was a sense of camaraderie and mutual support within these communities. Now let's talk about their education and skills briefly. The chasm between the education of a noble woman and a peasant woman was, of course, huge. Noble women had access to tutors who taught them not only literacy, but also languages such as French and Latin, essential for communication within and beyond England's borders. They were also instructed in rudimentary mathematics, because remember, they had to manage the estate while their husbands were gone. So they actually did know some math. They also learned some of the arts, like we talked about, playing music, instruments, dance, painting. All of this were things that noble women were schooled in if they were lucky enough to have those tutors, if their family provided them for them, which most of them probably would, because they wanted to have an educated daughter like that who could be a good partner for her future husband. Peasant women, on the other hand, they were educated in practicality and in survival. For them, schooling was very rare. Instead, they would learn essential skills from their mothers and from their communities: herbalism for treating family ailments, weaving, sewing, clothing repair, agricultural knowledge to support the family. Their education was not written in books, but passed down through generations in oral traditions and hands-on experiences. We're going to talk a lot also this month about marriage and family life. We talked a little bit about marriage last month during Love Month. This month, we're also going to talk about it more. Marriage in Tudor England varied dramatically across social strata. For noble women, marriages were generally arranged. They would marry early, or at least be betrothed early, to strengthen political alliances to improve the family's social standing. These marriages were negotiated by families. They involved intricate dowries or contracts. Love was a secondary consideration, if considered at all, with many noble women meeting their husbands for the first time at the altar. Peasant women still faced societal pressures, but they had a lot more agency in choosing their partners, often marrying for love or practical partnership. Their marriages were simpler affairs focused on mutual support and shared labor of running a household and farm. Dowries were still exchanged, but were very modest, often consisting of livestock, land rights, or household goods. Moving into the evenings for noble women were times of refinement and entertainment. Of course, the main meal would have been held earlier, but they would still have a dinner. A lot of times they would be hosting people. They would have entertainment, masks, showcasing their wealth and the wealth of the household. The household would probably gather for prayers before enjoying the evening entertainment, such as dances, plays, or musical performances, often with guests from neighboring estates. In contrast, a peasant woman's evening was focused on family and community. After their simple dinner, they might gather around the fire for storytelling, or singing folk songs, or just sharing the day's news with each other. These moments, though humble, were vital for maintaining the social fabric of the village, offering a rare chance for leisure and bonding in their labor-intensive lives. Let's talk about the challenges and hardships that the Tudor women had, depending on which class they were in. Tudor women, irrespective of their class, still faced formidable challenges. So childbirth was something that definitely did not discriminate, with limited medical knowledge and high maternity mortality rates. Legal rights also for women were minimal, their identities and properties subsumed under those of their fathers and husbands. This was true whether you were a noblewoman or you were the poorest peasant woman. Societal expectations confined women to roles that limited their autonomy and silenced their voices in the public arena. Yet, these women became masters at the soft power, finding ways to influence their families and their communities behind the scenes within the constraints of the period. And so there we go, a little bit about the day in the life of a Tudor woman, depending on what class she was in. So this month is going to be all about women's history, like I said, so that's going to be fun. Also, I just want to say, I want to give a really quick rant because yesterday's Tudor Minute was the birthday of Reginald Pole. And I guess I said something, kind of disparaging towards Reginald Pole. I'm not a fan of him. And somebody wrote in the comments, well, you probably are only saying this because he was Catholic. If he was Protestant, you'd be talking about how great it was that he stood up for his beliefs. I'm not a fan of Reginald Pole, not because of his beliefs. I'm not a fan of him because he said everything he did from the safety of the Vatican while his family is left in England to deal with the fallout of his treasonous writing. Like, I'm a super hard no on having your mother killed because of your writings, and you're not even strong enough to come back and say it to the king directly. You're going to say it from, like, Italy with the protection of the Pope. Meanwhile, your old mother is beheaded because of what you said. Like, no, go back and say it to Henry's face if you're going to say all of this stuff. So that's my problem with Reginald Pole. I don't care his beliefs at all. The world is made up of like lots of beliefs. That's what makes the world beautiful. We all believe different things. I don't care what he believed. But if you're going to believe something and you're going to like write treasonous papers about it and treasonous letters that like whether or not you think it should be treason, it doesn't matter. It was. So we're dealing with like what's so as opposed to like what we wish was so. So he in the real world wrote treasonous papers, wrote treasonous letters, and he didn't have the guts to go back and do it in England. And he didn't work on getting his family out before he did it, anything like that. He just left his family to suffer. And also, I think there's like a lack of respect when Henry literally paid for your education and Henry made it possible for you to be the one who's doing all that. Like, I'm no fan of Henry VIII either. He was like probably totally psychotic. I'm not going to armchair diagnose him from 500 years away. But yeah, I mean, clearly the guy was monstrous. And at the same time, you have to be kind of like able to hold two conflicting thoughts in your head at the same time. Henry paid for Reginald Pole's education. Reginald Pole turns around, writes all of this terrible stuff about him while his mother and his family is still in England having to deal with that. And he's just like, cry. And then like the whole family is killed. So yeah, I have a serious problem with Reginald Pole for doing that. And it has like nothing to do with his beliefs. It has everything to do with the fact that he wasn't like strong enough to come back and do it in person. He did it from the safety of miles and miles away. So yeah, there's my rant on Reginald Pole. Oh, I love the comments people leave. Also because they were like, the comment said, if he was saying this, you would say this. I'm like, I love it when people tell me what I wouldn't say. It's so much fun. So much. Anyway, guys, that was my rant. That was my Monday rant. If you made it to the end of this video and you're still here and you enjoyed it, I sure would appreciate a press of that like button. And I hope I earned your subscription to my channel where I put out videos like this on the regular. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. I know you have so many choices on YouTube and you chose to spend the last 10-15 minutes. I'm not sure exactly how long this will be until I edit it, but you chose to spend that time with me. I don't take it for granted. I so appreciate it. Thank you so much. Don't forget to drink your water, and I will be back soon.